A face to wear for every scare. Here's your look at the new NECA toys. It's The Many Faces of Pennywise. Figure comes back to the town of Derry with this new Many Faces of Pennywise. Collected in one set are 10 interchangeable heads from previously released figures, as well as a ton of movie-specific accessories. Just before we get a closer look at a bunch of scary head sculpts, 10 in total if you could believe it, let me first thank the folks over at NECA Toys that provided the sample of the brand new Many Faces of Pennywise that we could have a look at in this review. Before we bring out a bunch of Pennywises just for a couple of comparisons and we talk about the accessories that come included with the figure, let's first figure out how tall the figure actually stands. I'm going to take my ruler, put it right to the very top of his head, and the figure stands around 7.5 inches in height or 19 centimeters tall. And I'll just bring in a couple of Pennywise right now so you can see the difference of the figures. This one is the dancing clown Pennywise, who has a little bit more of a difficult time standing simply just because of his arms extending out like this. I've got him actually on a display stand right now, but still pretty much using the same body as the Many Faces of Pennywise that we're about to have a look at. And one of my personal favorites up to the release of the Chapter 2 Pennywise. Here he is next to the Well House release. Again, same bodies for the most part. The collar that they're using for the Many Faces of Pennywise, at least default out of packaging, I think is the one for Chapter 2. There's also an alternate collar piece that's going to be a little bit closer to the Pennywise on either side of them. Backing things up just a bit so you guys can actually see how much stuff gets packed along with this figure. Instead of looking at the heads right away, maybe we'll keep that for last. Instead, what we'll do is we'll look at all the accessories that come included with the figure, then we'll focus our efforts over at the head sculpts. Starting first, the figure comes included with a balloon. Longtime collectors of Pennywise figures may not find a red balloon included like this to be all that strange because pretty much all the figures have come included with a red balloon for the most part. The red balloon works the same way in the fact that there's a wire frame that attaches just behind the knot, and it goes all the way down a pretty lengthy wire as well, and it's adjustable, so you can manipulate it the way that you want. The problem I've always noticed with bending the wires like this is you can never get them straight again. Yeah, that's not going to look as straight as it was when I first took it out of the packaging. He does come with the same hands for first holding the balloon, which is the one that came included with the very first Pennywise. You remember this hand, it does have the hole in it. And on paper, the idea is that you can take then the wire and it fits into that hole. But the problem is that it never seems like the hole's big enough. Sometimes you're lucky enough to get in the first time. If not, you may actually have to go in there. I've seen some people try to widen that hole. The problem with it, if you make the hole too large like this, then the string of the balloon just slides straight through. Or the worst case scenario, if you try to feed the string through, it usually frays the end of it and you just start finding the plastic starts to bunch up right at the bottom before you have to like take little nail clippers and clip it off to get a nice cleaner end again. You can use this hand or the one that actually comes with the figure when you get him first out of the packaging. He comes with like these slightly more grabbing pincer hands, which as you can see, like the fingers are a little bit closer together like this. They do a little bit better of a job in the sense that you don't have to fight to try to get it inside that hole of the original hand, but still getting this into this hand isn't easy either. You can kind of get it in between the thumb and the finger. The grip could probably be a little bit more narrow. Now you can also just take this, heat the hand in hot water, soften up the plastic, fit the wire through, and then just bend, kind of bring the fingers together so you get a little bit more of a closer grip to hold the string. Again, I think this is a working better option if you want to have them displayed with the balloon. And like I said, you can kind of get it in there, but you're still going to have the same problem. First of all, it doesn't hold the string very well. And second of all, a lot of the weight is actually localized in the top of the balloon because there's so much more plastic there that it's going to make it for a little bit more of a wobbly experience of him holding it properly in his hand. I think for all really the accessories that he comes included with anyways, I'm less likely to display him with the balloon. I mean, it is possible to get it into his hand, but you can already see the problem that I'm facing. Yeah, the balloon just gets a little floppy and wobbly. Anyways, we're going to take the balloon out of his hand. We'll put the figure back down for a second because there's certainly a lot more to cover off. The figure comes included as well with the SS Georgie, which happened to be the same accessory that came included with the first issue Pennywise. It's made of a softer plastic, and you can see it's got written on the side there, SS Georgie. To go along with the SS Georgie boat is the SS Georgie arm. That's not really funny, but still, he comes included with the arm of Georgie. And it's a nice touch to see. I mean, the fact it's, when we think about really what it is, it's a severed arm of a small toddler, a small child. It's still cool the fact that they would have included it. And this, of course, can be displayed into his hands. You get a couple of, well, I guess really you could use these existing hands, just kind of pry the plastic away from themselves. You can pry the fingers, the same fingers that we looked at earlier, and you can kind of get Georgie's hand just slipped inside the clown's hand, like that, if you want to have him holding the hand like this. There is technically also the wider hands, but like these really aren't the best for holding Georgie's arm, but they are certainly suitable if you want to take the SS Georgie boat and have it sitting inside the palm of the clown. So you can do that as well. The figure comes also included, I guess while we're on the topic of hands, comes with a bunch of closed fists. And really, for all the accessories he comes included with, I'm less likely to really have him displayed with closed fists, but it's nice to see at least they include it. And the figure comes with a bunch of flat palms, or a pair of flat palms. Just grab them, flip them around to have them facing the right way. A pair of flat palms. And the figure also comes included with his monster arm, his monster hand, which, as you can see, does have the nice additional sculpting of the extended fingers, really painted nicely. I really like the look of this particular hand. Again, we got this released before. Put that to the side. The figure also comes, actually, we'll put that to the side for 1 second. The figure also comes included with an alternate collar piece. Let's just pick up Pennywise for a second. We'll just remove Georgie's arm, put that to the side anyways. And just to show you the difference between the two collar pieces. Now, this collar, I believe, came with a later release Pennywise, possibly even Chapter 2. You can see there's a slight more ruffling with the original collar piece that's closer to those other Pennywise that we used for comparisons earlier. If you want to change out the collar, you can just simply pop the head off the neck like that, remove the collar piece, and then we'll slip on this one. And just to show you quickly what it looks like between the two. This one's a lot wider of a collar, and it's a lot flatter, whereas as you can see, this one is a little more ruffled, and the layers are a little bit more, they stand out a little bit more as well. Can go either way, and even if you want to use then this head sculpt, you can just pop this back into place, like that. And you can see there's Pennywise with a more fluffier looking collar piece. On to now the figure's interchangeable head sculpts. And while it may seem like NECA included all the heads from the previously released Pennywise, in actual fact, all the heads that come packed with this figure either came from the Well House release or the It Chapter 2. Short of one head that gets carried over from the Dancing Clown, all the other unique head sculpts get left off this release, as well as they come packed along with the It Chapter 1 Pennywise. We're going to have a look at each of the individual heads, and through this I'll also bring in some of the omitted head sculpts, so you can sort of see what gets left off with this release of the many faces of Pennywise. Starting first, let's bring in a couple of ones from the past. Here are the ones that came included with the It Chapter 1 release. Now, there was a neutral head sculpt that had the mouth closed, and then there was a variation of that that had the mouth smiling. This one does technically get a slight upgrade in this release, so I can certainly understand why this one was left off. But it would have been nice, certainly, if they could have included this one, just because it's got a neutral head sculpt. We really don't have a Pennywise with its mouth closed like this, and because it's a nod to the original released Pennywise, the one that sort of started it all. I guess you could really make the valid argument that if you have been collecting Pennywise through the years anyways, you already have this head sculpt. But for a first-time buyer who's never picked up a Pennywise before and wants to get a definitive Pennywise, I think it would have been a nice nod to throw this head sculpt in there. There was also technically this head sculpt included too, which again gets omitted with this release. I'm not too upset with this one. This one I could have done without. But again, it would have been nice that they could have included this head sculpt. Let's start things off with grabbing this one here. And the reasoning why I wanted to grab it is because I said it's pretty close to the one that we got from the It Chapter 1. The upgrade, certainly for sculpting as well as the paint, this one is so much better than this one here. The darker contrast of the lines that go up his face, not to mention the darker coloring around his eyes, it's so much better of a head sculpt with this release than we got with the original one. So I can certainly understand why they wouldn't have included two of the exact or almost exact same head sculpts. I really like this head sculpt, by the way. Like I said, though, there were a couple of included ones from previous releases. Like this one here came included with the Dancing Clown. I'm going to grab the one that came included with the Dancing Clown so you can see the difference between the two. It's not as different of a change. Although I have to say, like, the coloring still is a lot better on the newer release than this one. This was the one that came with the original Dancing Clown. But I do like this one. Like, the coloring on the hair just alone is so much better than the one that we got with the Dancing Clown release. And again, like, the coloring of the eyes is so much sharper as well. It's a much scarier paint job that they did on this release. But again, at the very least, the Dancing Clown got this head sculpt thrown in there. What was unfortunately left off the table, though, a couple of ones that came included with the Dancing Clown, was the Flute Lady. The Flute Lady doesn't get a release in this set. Although, again, if you already have the Dancing Clown, then you already have the head sculpt anyways. At some point, I would like to see NECA Toys do a release of the Flute Lady. Hopefully one day that will happen. Another head sculpt that came included with the Dancing Clown that doesn't get a release in this time around is this one here. This one had all the gruesome looking hands that were coming out of Pennywise's mouth. It was one of my favorite head sculpts that came included with the Dancing Clown. And again, doesn't get included in this release. And the last one that didn't come included that was part of the original Dancing Clown was the one that had the light in the middle of its mouth. Again, such a great looking head sculpt. Valid argument, again, if you have been collecting all of the Pennywise, then it really doesn't matter, but it would have been nice that they could have included a couple of these. I know it would have certainly added up to about 15 head sculpts instead of just the 10 that we get. Always really like this one. This one actually does have the light up option, so you can press the button on the back, and it does illuminate. It's probably not a good idea to look directly at the light, but that was a really neat head sculpt. Again, doesn't get included with this release. But for the heads that did come included with the figure, we'll start first with the Well House releases. I'm not going to bring in every one of the heads simply just because, well, they're all the same heads that we get right here, other than these ones just have a much better paint job. This one does have the hole that goes in the one side of the eye and sticks out the side of the head right here. And the one accessory I didn't talk about earlier just because it had more to do with the head sculpt here, you get yourself the little iron rod, has a little point on the end of it. You can take that, feed it in the one side where the ear is, and then you sort of have to navigate it through until you find the hole out the eye. It's not something I find you can do right away. You sort of have to learn which angle you get it through, and then you just take that and you slide it all the way through. Such a cool looking head sculpt. I like the fact that at least they included this one, and it does give them the opportunity to include then the metal rod. You can run that right through his eye, out the side of his face. Gruesome. Gruesome. Other heads that come included with the figure, or this one right here with a slightly more stretched face, elongated mouth. And I hate to sound like a broken record saying it over and over again, but again, these are all the same head sculpts that came included with the Well House release, which really I think still had some of the best head sculpts. That one and the one from It Chapter 2 had the best head sculpts in my own personal opinion. But I like this one that it does have the stretched face. Again, in all the cases, the paint job is so much better. Then there's this one here as well. And this one, you know what, I will bring back in just because it's one of my personal favorite head sculpts. Like, the changes are subtle as the figures got a little bit later in their releases. This one's not too much different. Although you can see it's a little bit darker around the eyes. The eyes seem to stand out just a little bit more. And there's a lot more darker coloring I find on the original one. It's a little more of a darker red here on the one that comes included with the many faces of Pennywise. But yeah, same head sculpts. And we'll just move that to the side. The other one was the swept over hair when they were looking at the slides. Scary sight to see in the movie. It's not one of my favorite head sculpts. It's not one I ever really end up putting on my figures on my display. But again, the fact that we get all these heads, really stop for a second and realize how many heads we've gotten over the years with all these Pennywise. And then really the fact that they've collected at least some of, I would say, at least the 10 best head sculpts. There are, you know, you could say there are a few of the Dancing Clown that would have been nice to be included. But I guess really all the other ones, the ones that were left off, were sort of mutated looking Pennywise faces. Like, I mean, the hands coming out of the mouth, the open mouth showing the light source inside, again, are all exaggerated facial featured Pennywise. Whereas at least like these ones are like just your regular stock Pennywise with different expressions and different styled hair. So there's that one. And then we kind of get to the ones that were from It Chapter 2. And while we may not get ourselves the Flute Lady, we do get ourselves Robert Gray. And it's nice to see that we do get that. Still, though, down the road, I would like to see them release a Robert Gray release Pennywise, which again would have these scratched-in marks on his face. Not too much different from its original release. We also get one I seem to have used a lot for my thumbnail for the It Chapter 2. This is the one that had the tongue sticking out of his mouth. One of my personal favorites as well. And the last one that we get, and one of my personal favorites as well, is the one that had the big giant smile. Which really isn't that far different. Let's just grab the one that came included with the Well House. It isn't that much different from the Well House release, although it's more classic looking Pennywise hairstyle. And I would say like the smile is a little bit more closer to being like Joker's smile with a lot more visible teeth. Again, both of these get released with the ultimate, with the many faces of Pennywise. I have to get away from saying the ultimate. And then, of course, the one that comes included with the figure. This whole time, this poor figure has been abandoned in the background here. The other one that came released, now this one also came packed with the It Chapter 2 release, which is, again, just a regular neutral head sculpt. This one does have the mouth open. And I just want to grab the one from It Chapter 1 just to bring that back in so you can kind of see where things have gone differently. You know, yeah, it would be nice that they could have included it, but I could certainly understand, like, the ones from Well House and It Chapter 2 are honestly the best head sculpts that we've gotten from the Pennywise figure, so I can understand why they would have plucked those ones. And yeah, if you did want to get the ones with the more exaggerated faces, like the one from the Dancing Clown, for example, you could easily just use this one from your other figure and just pop it back onto the head on this one if you want to display the figure. Or likelihood, if you already have the figure, you may already have them being displayed with this head sculpt anyways. Anyways, though, looking at the rest of the figure, I'll just quickly look at the head sculpt that sort of starts things stock when you get the figure out of the packaging. You know, honestly, the one that comes with the figure when you get them out of the packaging is maybe one of my least favorites that come with this release. Let's just grab one. I'm going to grab one I think is looking a little nicer. Yeah, I'm going to go with this head sculpt. To take the heads off, by the way, super easy. Just pop those right off. You have a singular post. That also serves as well as the ball joint. And we can go ahead and just put on a real sinister looking Pennywise. The socket, by the way, the little post, fits fairly easy into the hole. If you're having any difficulties, by the way, you could also just heat the head up just a little bit with a hairdryer and then just pop that in place. That's so much nicer. Still sticking with the more fluffy looking collar piece, but again, if you wanted to use the other one, it is available. It's just a little more flatter. I kind of like the one that's a little more frillier though. But yeah, for the rest of his body, it's not much different from the other Pennywises that we've looked at before. I think really the mileage that you're getting out of this release is the fact that you get all those extra head sculpts from probably ones that you already have in your collection, but I will say at least the paint jobs are a little bit more richer. Even like the costume here on Pennywise is a much darker color. Let's just grab in quickly the one from Well House so you can see the difference between the two. Yeah, the Many Faces is notably darker of a gray. Even like the pom-poms, for example, are a little more muted of a red. They're not as bright of a red as the one that came with the Well House. But the bodies are very much identical. I don't think there's anything that they've changed. In the legs, the footwear, and even like the cuffs on the bottoms of the legs and the cuffs on the sleeves, they seem to be identical between the two figures. The darker color works well, I think, for Pennywise. The more darker contrast of color. It also seems like it's a little shinier, too, than the other Pennywise that we've gotten before. Just spin this around so you can see it. By now, I'm sure if you've watched videos enough on this channel, covered off all of the Pennywise figures as they've been released. So again, there's not much different here with this release that we haven't gotten already. It's just the benefit of having so many extra heads to work with. Looking at the articulation though on Pennywise, as head rotates back and forth, I probably did myself a disservice by keeping this collar in place because it's a little harder to kind of gain access to the head. I mean, it can rotate back and forth, up and down, but if I had the less frillier looking collar, I'd probably be able to rotate the head a little bit better than what I was doing right now. As for the arms hinge out at a 45-degree angle. You're probably not going to get much more than that just because the way that the sleeves are so puffy like this. Looks like a pirate shirt that Jerry Seinfeld would have to wear. The arms rotate all the way around. There is also a double hinge on the elbow. There's a hinge right there and right there. You can bend it right there. There's also a rotation at the top and there's a rotation at the bottom on either side of those joints. Hands rotate all the way around as well. upper torso on a ball joint. I know by now we probably covered off all of this over the many years of covering Pennywise figures, but yeah, all the same articulation. The legs split out. Just enough of a gap on either side of the skirting here where you can actually move the legs out. You can bring them forward, back, swivel at the top of the thigh. Figure has a double hinge on the knee. And then when it comes to his feet do have an ankle pivot, and you can also move them up and down. Again, with this figure release, it's sort of one of those things where if you already have collected the Pennywise figures, the only thing you're really benefiting from getting this release is a much better paint job on all of the head sculpts from both the Well House and the It Chapter 2. Yeah, true, there are some heads that have been left off, unfortunately, with this release, mostly from the Dancing Clown. The It Chapter 1, even though I did include it as part of this review, is something that was left off. At the end of the day, I'm not too devastated. It would have been nice to throw in there just as a nod, but in all honest truth, even if they had included the It Chapter 1 head sculpt, I probably wouldn't have had it displayed with the figure anyways. The Dancing Clown, I think, is the real thing that was unfortunately missed with this release, but I can certainly understand why NECA Toys wouldn't have wanted to include every single head that comes included with the figure. I mean, the ones that come with the hands coming out of his mouth, as well as the light in the middle, I can certainly understand why they wouldn't have included those. And the Flute Lady, I mean, really, if you want to have a definitive Pennywise anyways, you're likely not going to be displaying him with the Flute Lady head sculpt anyways. Still a nice looking figure. I think even if you have been collecting the Pennywise in the past, I think there's enough upgraded here, just on the paint alone, that I think it's worth picking up. But it certainly does benefit new time collectors, first time picking up a Pennywise. Instead of having to pick up the older Pennywise and finding them on places like eBay, do yourself a better service and just pick up the many faces of Pennywise, because you're pretty much getting the best of Pennywise boxed up in one release. NECA's The Many Faces of Pennywise is sort of the equivalent of a band putting out a greatest hit album. Yeah, it's not going to have every one of your favorites on there, but it's going to have all the greatest hit that everybody knows. The only casualty, unfortunately, that doesn't make this release are a lot of that really cool head sculpts that came packed along with the Dancing Clown. The It Chapter 1, yes, it doesn't come included with any of those head sculpts, but really, I mean, we probably wouldn't have displayed the figure with those heads anyways. It really is collecting the heads from the two best figures that NECA have released, the Well House and the It Chapter 2. My personal favorites, so I really can't fault the fact that they chose these head sculpts, leaving out the more complicated, more elaborate heads that came included with the Dancing Clown. And me really as well. The Flute Lady, you're probably not going to display with the figure. I mean, anyone who would say, I really wish that this figure could have come included with the Flute Lady head sculpt, would you really ever display your Pennywise with the Flute Lady head? I would hope and just reserve that space instead for when eventually NECA releases a Flute Lady figure, and I hope that one day will come. But yeah, I do think that you're really getting the greatest hit, best of album here for Pennywise. I can imagine only the frightful songs that would be on a Pennywise greatest hit album. Probably something about eating children. Anyways, though, a big thank you, though, to the folks over at NECA Toys that provided this sample of the Many Faces of Pennywise. Maybe in the comments section, let me know down below which of the head sculpts that come included in this set is your favorite. I've now displayed here in Final Looks, spinning around on the rotisserie, one of my personal favorites, that big clown smile that he has in It Chapter 2, with a runner-up I think is either from Well House, that other big smile, or the big shaggy dog tongue. Those are some of my personal favorites. But what are your personal favorites? Let me know down below in the comments section. And hey now, if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. You turn on the bell notification, and please be so kind as to come back on a regular basis, because there's always going to be new NECA reviews lined up and coming your way. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.